Thanks for tuning in to this episode of The Resilient Advisor. My name is Jay Coulter, and this is part of our Investment Spotlight show with my partner, Chris Versace. On this episode, we speak with James Lanthier, CEO of Mindset Pharma. So, Chris, what was your overall thoughts around this interview?
So, Jay, we've seen a lot of companies. We've had some even here on the Investment Spotlight series that are attacking the psychedelics market, and they all have different ways that they're doing it. I think what I found very interesting about Mindset's strategy is that they're not looking necessarily to make new ground, but really capitalize on improvements to existing drugs so they can actually minimize negative aspects of them, side effects, if you will, duration issues, that sort of thing, and really concentrate on amplifying the benefits. So to me, that really speaks as if that they are a 2.0, 3.0 opportunity. So when we take a look at how they're focused versus where we are in the psychedelic marketplace today, which is really coming into its own, the sense I get is that they're going to have an advantage just as that market really starts to hit that tipping point. Thank you, Malcolm Gladwell, right? The other aspect too is the way that they're going about it with their business. Are they necessarily going to bring products to market? No, they're sticking to their knitting, which is really on designing and developing these next iteration of psychedelic compounds and solutions. So that gets me excited.
It also sounded like the next 3 quarters are going to be very pivotal for the organization. And you did a great job of unpacking all the opportunities that they have in front of them.
I appreciate that. And you're absolutely right. They've got something like 100 compounds or more than 100 compounds that they're testing. There's a handful, it sounds like, that are kind of at the forefront. And your timing is right that there could be some interesting announcements, let's say by the middle of 2022.
I hope you enjoyed this interview with James Lanthier, CEO of Mindset Pharma.
Jay Coulter and Chris Versace do not own any interest in the companies that they interview at the time of the recording or 30 days after the initial release of the show.
Today, Chris Versace and I are speaking with James Lanthier, CEO of Mindset Pharma, which trades on the Canadian Stock Exchange under the symbol MSET. James, my partner Chris is going to do the majority of the interviewing here, but I'd like to start at a high level. Why should investors be looking at your company?
So thanks so much for having me on. First of all, it's a real pleasure. The reason why investors should be looking at Mindset is because Mindset's built up a leadership position in what we describe as next generation drug discovery in psychedelic medicine. And that, for reasons that I hope we'll get into, is the end of the psychedelic market that we think will ultimately be by far the most valuable part of the market.
Okay, so let's break down that opening statement, James. Leading position. What do you mean by that? How are you quantifying that? Next generation. I'm curious as to what you mean by that, because to a lot of folks, the psychedelic market is new now. But you're telling me that you guys are working on stuff, at least your language tells me that you're working on stuff that would probably be revolutionary based on what is currently coming to market. Is that right?
That's exactly right. So what we mean by next generation drugs are actually, let me back up. What we mean by first generation drugs are some of these psychedelic drugs that people may have heard of, things like psilocybin, which is the psychoactive component of what people used to call, or still do, call magic mushrooms, or MDMA, which is, again, the drug people used to call ecstasy. These are drugs where there's been a lot of research that's gone into them over the last few decades, and really, there's a tremendous amount of evidence now that those drugs, as well as a number of the other drugs like DMT and LSD, can actually do a really good job of helping people with what we call neuropsychiatric disorders or mood disorders, is a simpler term for them. So today, viewers might be seeing lots of headlines about how these drugs are making their way through regulatory pathways, through FDA acceptance. to approval, and all that is happening. The issue that we see with first generation drugs is really twofold. Number one, the drugs weren't designed to be used by large population groups, so they're not as safe necessarily as they could be, and they're not as predictable, and their duration of action sometimes isn't ideal. The drugs also they're all in the public domain. So for big pharma or for life science investors to really push psychedelic medicine forward, they're really not going to do it with generic drugs they're not going to start with generic drugs that are in the public domain. Right. They're going to want to have access to drugs that have full, strong IP rights. So what Mindset is doing is essentially applying modern day drug design, modern day behavioral pharmacology, the standard tools of biotechnology companies to these first generation drugs, to try to make drugs that A, are better, and B, will have full patent rights.
Okay, so when you're talking about that, the designer aspect of it and next generation, just for people who might be more familiar with technology stocks, you're really talking like, either 2.0 or 2.5.0 on the pathway to 3.0, correct?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. And by this design, this tinkering, if you will, I assume you're trying to augment the benefits and downplay the side effects. And just
exactly.
before you answer, there was one other, in talking to another company, my understanding is that there is a lot of work that's going on, and I think you touched on this, to have a not fixed, but a more predictable duration of the experience, because some, as again, my understanding, no firsthand trials here, it's not necessarily like a 2-hour window. It could be anywhere from 2 hours to 6 to 8 hours long with what's on the market, either today or what people have played with in the past.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So what our scientific team is doing is essentially making small, very targeted adjustments to the structure of these compounds. And they're doing that, and they're really trying to solve for, as you pointed out, really two things. They're trying to make drugs with fewer side effects, and that are likely to be safe for as large a group of people as possible. And they're also trying to address the duration issue. So today, psilocybin, which is one of the drugs that's furthest ahead in FDA approvals, seems to do a really good job of helping people who have treatment-resistant depression, but it certainly does have I would say a duration issue. It lasts for 6 to 8 hours, and that's a really long time to have to spend in a therapist's office, because obviously they can't let you leave while you're on your trip, and it also ties up a lot of resources to try to to deliver that therapy to you. You need at least 2 therapists in the office, and so that's a pretty expensive model of treating someone. So that's one of the goals that we're trying to solve for is a drug that is going to have a shorter duration. And so in some of our new drugs, we're seeing half-lives that are half of what you see in psilocybin, and even less than that in some of our families. So yeah, that's really one of the key goals.
What's the target window, you think, for it to be really commercially viable? Because you raise a good point. And we've heard other companies that are trying to work, both develop compounds, solutions, and move into the therapy aspect of it as well, working with clinicians. Yeah. But and again, we're not here to pass judgment on that. But it would seem to me, to your point, that medicine is increasingly, particularly here in the States, a volume business. So how do you get that volume up to acceptable levels? So come at it from a different perspective. What do you think the sweet spot is for that trip duration?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I would say actually anyone who tells you that they know for sure is not really speaking from a position of authority. So so what I can tell you is that we're trying to design drugs that have all kinds of different durations. So we have some of our new psychedelic drugs from our newest family have durations as short as 15 minutes. Some of them are an hour. Again, some of them are in that kind of 3 to 4 hour zone that is half of psilocybins. I think the thing is that the research is, we're just at the starting of this medical psychedelic renaissance, if you want to call it that. And I think the research is being done now and will be done by doctors and scientists to really figure out for the patient what is the ideal trip length. So our goal is to really do the design work and frankly own the intellectual property behind drugs that have a whole spectrum of different durations.
And it's the idea, just really for the listener, but also too for myself, should we be thinking about it is that the length of the duration, you said as short as 15 minutes, 2 hours, 3 hours, does that really speak to the application use, meaning what it's trying to help someone overcome?
I don't think we know. I don't think that the industry knows for sure. Again, I think what we see down the line is we think that the future of psychiatric medicine, neuropsychiatry is going to be very personalized. So it may well be that a short trip duration, obviously you can throughput and treat more patients that way more economically, and it's less of a burden on the patients. But there may be some indications where you need a long duration. There may be some indications that you can deal with a really short duration. We don't know. There's literally hundreds of studies and trials going on right now using psychedelics drugs to treat a whole wide range of different indications. So we're going to let those play out. And Mindset's focus is really on trying to do the design work to create optimized, safe drugs for every one of those potential use cases, or as many of them as possible.
Okay, so your point about hundreds of testing going on and things like that. Look, we know that the psychedelic space is in some respects similar to what the cannabis space was, call it 12, 24 months ago. A lot of enthusiasm, a lot of competitors trying to figure out what to do, what to bring. There's going to be winners, there's going to be losers. It's just the nature of how a market evolves. What really separates you from the pack? What's your competitive advantage in all of this?
So you're absolutely right. There's lots of companies in the field today, but I think one of the big advantages for Mindset is that when we first started off a couple of years ago, this didn't feel like an advantage at the time. We were going around talking about next generation drugs and why those are important for the same reasons that we've already discussed. And I'll be honest, we met with a lot of kind of confused stares at the time, because people were just investors, other strategics were just starting to hear about psychedelics and psilocybin and didn't understand or appreciate why next generation drugs would be important. In hindsight, that actually was a huge advantage for Mindset, because it meant that the field was relatively open for Mindset to really comprehensively file patent applications on applying a whole range of different drug design strategies to psilocybin and to DMT and 5-MeO-DMT. So this all goes to one of the reasons why Mindset is really, in my view, in kind of a pole position in next generation drugs, is because we were one of the first groups to be in there doing design work, filing patent applications, which is hugely important in in any biotech space, because whoever files their patent application first has priority. So that's one reason. But from there, we've really built on I think that early lead, and we've done, to my knowledge, as much or more development work on drugs that are covered in those patent applications as any other group in the space. So today we have, and have shared very publicly, data around 4 different families that we've identified in our portfolio of new drugs that each offer some or have some different areas of improvement over the original drugs. So I would say, to summarize it, we have the earliest dates on our patent filings. We have a very broad coverage provided by those patent filings, and now as much data on new psychedelic drug candidates as anybody else.
So just a couple follow-ups to that. You're really talking about building out your IP, which says that your bench and the people who are doing the work need to be impressive, world-class. Can you talk about those folks?
Yeah, look, there's lots of good scientists in the psychedelic space. Absolutely. But I think, you'd be hard pressed to find a team that's as specifically skilled at small molecule new drug development as Mindset's founding scientific team. And so we really cover kind of the basis for what you need in early stage drug discovery. So our medicinal chemist, Dr. Malik Selassie, is really an elite medicinal chemist. He has, I think, something like 140 patents to his name. Has successfully designed small molecule drugs across a number of different areas that have gone through FDA approval to market. He's been very enterprising. He's had some major exits based on his compound designs. So that's the set of skills of the person that you need to actually design the drug. Then you need to have a set of skills for identifying really which are the most promising candidates to take forward. And so that's the other side of our team. That's Joseph Arujo, who's really a world expert in behavioral pharmacology. He's also the CEO of really a premier contract research business that specializes in predictive animal models for central nervous system drugs. So that's a lot of kind of technical description. What that means practically is that he owns a business that gets approached and services a wide range of different pharma companies that they come to his business when they have a drug that touches the central nervous system. So it's things like pain, epilepsy, Alzheimer's, or depression. And he's able to test these drugs in mice, rats, a number of different other types of animals, and has these different models that can really predict with a pretty high level of accuracy whether the drug is going to have the desired effect in humans. So between those two sets of skills, Mindset really has the basis covered for new drug discovery, which is exactly our business. And I think really outside of one or two other companies in the space, you'd be hard pressed to find a scientific team that is as specifically skilled at that as ours is.
Now, James, you just said something I want to key in on. You said the business is drug discovery, right? So what does that mean in terms of a go-to-market strategy? Who are your customers if you're discovering the drugs? Are you going to be is Mindset's plan to help commercialize and launch product, or are you thinking more of an IP licensing type of business model?
Yeah, so our goal is, it's very hard, as we all know, to do more than one thing well in business. We're not trying to be, the psychedelic Pfizer, if you will. We really want to focus because, again, we're just at the early stages of this market forming. We think there's huge opportunities even beyond these 4 families. There's hundreds of known psychedelic drugs out there. We've learned, I think, more than anybody else about what drug designs can be used to improve the performance of psychedelic drugs. We want to go on and we want to apply that to, these hundreds of less well-studied psychedelic drugs. So our go-to-market, and we can really see this coming, the market turning our way. We expect to partner with other, mainly pharma companies that are interested in getting into the space and have some ideas and want to get access to molecules that have, again, full intellectual property rights, rather than trying to compete on a formulation of a generic drug like psilocybin. So it's very much our business plan to not have to raise the hundreds of millions of dollars that you need to take a single drug all the way through, FDA approval, but to license and partner and collaborate with pharma companies. And we're seeing a lot of interest from the market, today in that. So it's very much playing out the way we thought it would.
Okay. Now, when you do this, there, and again, I apologize for going back to the technology world, but there are companies that do tremendous amounts of intellectual property research. They have a very robust patent portfolio, but some of their solutions can be sold into a variety of markets. So for example, one of my companies I really like, Qualcomm, they have baseband chip processors. They've got some ungodly percentage of the market, right? But they sell the different baseband chips to all the different competitors, right? Apple, Samsung, let them fight it out. For you guys, is it like that? Or is there more an avenue of exclusivity for a particular solution, compound, molecule, depending on what we're talking about?
Well, it really depends. I mean, I think one of the factors that's very much in our favor is that there really is like a wide range of different indications that psychedelic drugs have at least some preliminary evidence that they work for, and some of these can be, you could say that they're related, but really some of them are quite different. So today there's studies underway. Beyond the depression or major depressive disorder or post-traumatic stress that psilocybin and MDMA are being studied for clinically, extending it to smoking cessation, weight loss, addiction, and this isn't like made up wishful thinking. Like there are some preliminary studies that show that these drugs have some applicability to them. So when it comes to licensing your drugs, there's definitely lots of different ways to split it up, and certainly there's potential to license drugs for multiple indications, single indications, specific geographic markets. There's lots of different ways to carve it up. I think that what stands mindset in really good stead is the fact that is just the sheer breadth of new drugs that we've discovered and that we continue to discover. So today at this point we've synthesized over, I think, 100 different compounds. We've had a tremendously high success rate of testing them preclinically, some validation that they have, a psychedelic effect, and have some potentially, enhanced characteristics. And it just gives us lots of different shots on goal for getting to more than one successful clinical stage drug, and lots of different shots on goal for getting to more than one successful partnership or collaboration.
Can we talk about one? I believe in doing my homework, one of the ones that you guys have talked a little more publicly about is MSP. I think it's 1014, if I have it right.
Yeah.
Now my understanding there is that's kind of your counterpoint to psilocybin, right? Or at least today's psilocybin.
Sure.
So again, understanding certain things are, either confidential, proprietary. You talked earlier about designing, right, certain aspects to it. How is MSP 1014 better designed than, say, 1.0 psilocybin?
Yeah, so MSP 1014 comes out of our what we call our family number one. So this is the first family of new drugs that we designed, and at a high level, we think that 1014 really has the potential to compete against psilocybin ultimately very well as kind of a second generation psilocybin, and we think that. Based on the data we've seen so far, it has some really distinct safety advantages over psilocybin. So psilocybin is generally understood to be, and it is, not an addictive drug, and generally regarded as fairly safe. But I think what we haven't seen yet, or what we're going to start to see, are more studies of psilocybin being used in large groups of people who suffer from treatment-resistant depression or major depressive disorder. And the odds are that if you are, one of the, unfortunately, very large group of humans who suffer from depression, and you're not responding to current treatments, there's a pretty high likelihood that you may have more than one thing wrong with you, and you may be on some prescription medication to deal with that, which means that you're a more you're a population group that needs to be dealt with a fair amount of care. And what we've seen profiling 1014 against psilocybin is some pretty strong safety signals coming out of those tests. So one of those was a test where we observed body temperature in mice. And what we saw as we increased the dose of psilocybin was a really steep reduction in body temperature, actually all the way to 6 degrees, which is a huge drop. And, something, if it were in humans, that could really put you in some jeopardy. With 1014, we didn't see any decline at body temperature as we increased doses. And to us, that's a really significant safety signal. It's also actually a stronger drug. And you might be thinking that, well, isn't stronger potentially more dangerous? Well, one of the advantages of a stronger drug is that you can actually take less of it to achieve the same effect, right? So I think between those two factors, we think there's some real potential for 1014 to compete against psilocybin on the basis of safety, which obviously is critically important.
And where are you with MSP 1014 today in terms of testing?
So we're just about to finish our preclinical profiling of 1014. We'll be filing an IND plan in early next year, and we're hoping to be in clinical trials by later in 2022.
Okay, so late 2022. So if all goes well, what's the soonest you think that you would either have through one of your partners a product in the market, let's say, and when do you think you might be able to announce that product? Again, understanding that timetables slip, things happen. What are you targeting, or what have you shared that you're targeting?
Yeah, so we haven't made any public statements around this, and I think
we're not going to, James. We're not going to tell anybody. What I would say is, if it has to go all the way through all three phases of FDA approval, then odds are we're not looking. We shouldn't be expecting 1014 to be in market before 2026. Okay. around that time frame. Drug development is a long process, but I think what I would say is certainly I don't think investors are going to have to wait nearly that long for developments around the commercialization of our drug assets. We are seeing lots of interest today in partnering with Mindset. 1014 really is just the beginning for Mindset. Mindset has a whole series of other families that I think probably offer some even starker improvements over the original drugs. So okay, so I think you said that 1014 is out of your first family. There are 3 other families, and you've got, according to my notes, it looked as if you guys had said at one point 75 compounds, but you said earlier over 100.
We're now up over 100, yeah.
Okay. So assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, if 1014 is the most furthest along in testing, right? How far behind it are some of the other ones?
So family number 2 and family number 4 are actually not far behind at all. Though it's really that in family number 1 we've made the decision around what the lead and what the backup candidates are. Family number 2 and family 4, frankly, we have really we've got so many good choices to choose between as to what to advance that it's that we're actually having a hard time making that call. But we should be able to announce some other lead candidates from those families, I would say, in the next 2 to 3 months.
Cool. Now, Jay, did you notice that just like in every family, the third kid just gets left out? So no, that's wonderful. Let's shift gears a little bit. One of the things that with biotech companies, and you're going through these trials, and it's in my opinion, it's always a race may not be the right word, but it's a path to product, a path to profitability. In order to get there, you need to have staying power. To me, that says you need to have a strong balance sheet, understanding that you're going to chew through cash as your R&D spins up, spins down, depending on where you are in your portfolios and testing. So James, talk to us about, cash on the balance sheet, how much runway, whether it's months, quarters, years, what runway do you see ahead of you?
Yeah, so our last financing was in April of this year. It was an oversubscribed financing for $8.5 million. The proceeds from that will last us through mid-2022. What I would say is that we expect our partnerships or potential partnerships to really fund the ongoing development expenses of families once they hit a clinical stage. And so one of Mindset's big early advantages has been thanks to the fact that Joseph Arujo is one of our co-founders. We've been able to really do a lot of our preclinical development. And if you recall, he also runs the contract research business. We've been able to do a lot of our preclinical development really cost effectively and really efficiently. So that's meant we've been able to be, I'd say, really pretty capital efficient in the development of those first 100, drug candidates. Absolutely, clinical trials, once you start testing drugs in humans, everything gets, a lot more expensive. But I expect that, the majority of those expenses will be able to strike arrangements with partners where we'll be able to offset a lot of those expenses. So I don't anticipate that we're going to need to have to raise, ourselves the hundreds of millions of dollars to fund later stage trials.
So if I parse your words and play them against each other in a friendly way, it sounds as if that that last capital raise you said should carry you through mid-22, investors might be thinking, sometime in the second quarter of 2022, there might be some good news to be had.
Yeah, I think
is that possible?
Absolutely.
Okay, fair enough. I got to tell you, I am excited about this because, and I'm going to throw a comparison out to you that I know Jay is going to do what he usually does when I say these things, which this is what he's going to do. Are you ready? One of those. So I think that if you think back, and I'm saying this as a red-blooded male, if we look back on the impact of pharmacology, arguably one of the biggest points of revolution for lifestyle, workforce, what have you, was the pill, right? And then if you carry that forward from initial formulation to refinements and other things that it was able to do, ease on the body, all this other stuff. Those 2.0, 3.0 formulations were really earth-shattering compared to the initial pill that was out there, which, as we know from history and reading, had all sorts of side effects that nobody wanted. And I get excited when I hear stuff about what you're talking about, because it sounds similar.
Yeah, I think that's a great analogy. I think the other analogy that I'd use is the work that had to be done to go from the bark of the willow tree to aspirin, right? So for thousands of years, different cultures knew that the bark of the willow tree could cure pain. So you'd brew a tea. The Egyptians would brew a tea from it. But it also made you sick to your stomach, right? It made you really nauseous. And we got to the 19th century where German chemists had to do a lot of work to work through a whole bunch of intermediate compounds to go from salicin to all the way to aspirin. And that took decades, but eventually they got to a drug that didn't make you sick to your stomach, and it cured your pain, and it became for many decades the gold standard for everyday pain relief. We see the same opportunities with psychedelic drugs. Magic mushrooms, psilocybin's an amazing compound. It's not perfect. We can do better, and we should be able to do better, and we should be able to move a lot faster. And we are moving a lot faster than the German chemists moved in the 19th century, because we have all of the benefit of modern day biotechnology and all of that understanding of medicinal chemistry and tools to figure out which are the most promising leads. That's really what we're doing here at Mindset. We're trying to create ideal, optimized drugs that still deliver the same benefits that are so tantalizing in these first generation psychedelic drugs. But we can do better, and we will do better, and that's what we're doing.
So one of the things when you talk about business and business opportunity, it's always smart, I think, to discuss the big opportunity, right? That is being presented, and I think we did that. On the other hand, there's always a question of what are the risks as tied to the business, and some might be obvious, some might not be. But for someone who's just rolling up their sleeves and deciding, oh, Mindset, this looks pretty promising, but I don't know what are some of the hurdles or hiccups that I need to be mindful of as a potential investor. James, what are those things that keep you up at night? The worries that you have over not the next week, next month, but really between now and this time next year.
Well, let's be honest, right? Drug, biotechnology and drug discovery are inherently risky businesses. Lots of drugs fall down in pursuing, FDA approval. But what I take a fair amount of comfort from is that if you compare what we're doing to a drug discovery company, in another sector, pick one, doesn't matter. Our approach is relatively de-risked because we already know that psilocybin does a pretty good job at helping people with depression. We already know that MDMA does a pretty good job of helping people with post-traumatic stress. We have a decent understanding to a degree of how they work in the brain. And so really, we're not trying to create something totally new. We're just trying to create something incrementally better. So yeah, biotechnology, sure, it's risky, but I think compared to a standard biotech, our approach is much more de-risked.
Okay, but I got to hold you accountable for at least one.
Yeah.
What's the biggest risk?
I think there will be there's a certain percentage of the population that these drugs won't work for, right? So we know that psychedelic drugs are contraindicated if you have a history or a genetic predisposition to something like psychosis or schizophrenia. And I have a little bit of a fear that as some of these decriminalization movements really pick up, that access becomes somewhat less restricted to these drugs, and the wrong people take them and hurt themselves, and that could cause a bit of a backlash to their use. So I think that's something that like I watch and I'm mindful of, because I think that the use of the drugs needs to be carefully controlled, and we need to make sure that people are supervised when they're using them, and that the wrong people aren't taking them.
That's actually a great point, and I think it's another differentiator between the cannabis industry, which as I think we all know, is really going down two paths, right? There's the recreational side, and then there's the medicinal side, and I understand exactly what you're saying. Because the way that the psychedelics are used are very, very different. You alluded to some of them, some of the differentiators now, but I think that's a good one to call out. It's smart, without a doubt.
Well, I'm North America, may be accepting of big clouds of cannabis hanging over most of their downtowns nowadays. Somebody on a 8-hour psychedelic trip, that's a different animal. So are we ready for people walking around on psychedelic trips? I don't know. I think there might be some backlash to that. So that's.
So James, you have me at a rare moment where I'm hearing what you just said, and I'm thinking there's got to be a joke here somewhere. There has to be, but I can't find it. But I think you're right, though. I mean, it's not like we'll be The Walking Dead or something like that. But it's one of those things that the social acceptance of it, I think, is something that has to be hasn't been proven yet. Although I do think that a lot of people are staring down the opioid crisis. There has to be something better. There has to be something than being on the amount of medication that people are on for so prolonged periods of time without seeing any real results. And I really welcome this aspect of what we'll call disruptive innovation.
Yeah, I think people are, the culture has really changed. I think that the overall cost of these of depression, of opioid addiction is incredibly high. People are a lot of the methodologies don't work. People are open to solutions. You can just see in how people talk about these things that attitudes are changing massively. Obviously I think that's a good thing, but if the decriminalization moves too quickly, there could be a reaction against it. So that's one of the things I fear.
So before I turn it back to Jay, I will say, well, let me ask you guys a question. You must have it. Do you have Amazon Prime?
Sure.
Jay, I know you have Amazon Prime. So they also have Prime Video, and there's a show on there. It's proprietary to Amazon Prime called Goliath, and it's a Billy Bob Thornton program. He's an attorney, kind of colorful personality in history. Let's just leave it at that. But the case they're on now is going up against Big Pharma because of the opioid crisis. And I can't remember if it's the second episode or the third episode, but the open, before the opening credits, the open is a montage about the opioid crisis. And one of the characters, I think it's J.K. Simmons, is like, they call me the painkiller, and I'm here to stay. So I think it's a big social commentary on the opioid crisis. So I really do think, not to belabor this, but I do think that there's a lot to be done here on a number of different fronts. And I'm looking forward to hearing about Mindset's progress as it goes forward.
Well, thank you very much. And, we're really looking forward to keeping you updated, and really appreciate the opportunity to tell you what we're up to.
Jay?
Yeah, James, you can see why Chris is the best at what he does. I really enjoyed listening to you guys talk about your company, break it down. For viewers, if you'd like to learn more about Mindset Pharma, please visit mindsetpharma.com. That's mindsetpharma.com. And as a reminder, they trade on the Canadian Stock Exchange under the symbol MSET. James, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks, Jay.
Thanks so much.
Important information. The information provided is for educational and informational purposes only and does not constitute investment advice, and it should not be relied on as such. It should not be considered a solicitation to buy or an offer to sell a security, and you should consult your attorney or tax advisor. All information has been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but its accuracy is not guaranteed. There is no representation or warranty as to the current accuracy, reliability, or completeness of, nor liability for, decisions based on such information, and it should not be relied on as such. Pinger Systems, LLC, doing business as Resilient Advisor, was compensated